All kings and queens are not born of royal bloodlines. Some become royal because of what they do once they realise who they are. Pharrell Williams. Plato's allegory of the cave, believed to be the inspiration for the movie The Matrix, suggests appearances are mere shadows representing a glimmer of the true reality. However, in a world with an increasing expectation, we should show deference to institutions of power, whether a literal king or queen, those in elected office, the famous or the wealthy. It's Plato's parable of the three metals that is perhaps more revealing. Told in Book 3 of his work The Republic, the parable of the metals holds that each citizen has a metal mixed with his or her soul. In the souls of those most fit to rule as philosopher kings or queens, there is gold. In those suited to be warriors, protectors of law and order, there is silver. And in those suited to be workers, there is either bronze or iron. Plato suggested that it was the responsibility of the philosopher kings and queens to perpetuate a so-called noble lie, to maintain order and harmony. This noble lie proposes all citizens have a common origin in the Earth Mother, not as the reason for everyone to enjoy equal status, but to encourage people to accept their place and assigned roles. The same noble lie appears in George Orwell's novel Animal Farm, in which, after taking over the farm, the pig Napoleon declares that while all animals are equal, some are more equal than others. Sound familiar? This episode of Archetypes of Awakening will decode the sovereign archetype in the form of the king and queen through a deeper look at what it represents beyond immediate appearances. We will not argue whether it is right or wrong to have kings and queens in the 21st century, because whether a flag-waving loyalist or anti-royal who believes them to be a gross waste of money when so many rely on food banks, ultimately, when viewed archetypally, it doesn't matter. What matters is whether you recognize what the image of a monarch represents within you as a path to self-realization. This, we will propose, is ultimately revealed in the symbolism of the coronation of a new monarch. Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz emphasized the archetype of the sovereign as a representation of the integration and wholeness of the individual psyche. Just as a sovereign rules over a kingdom, this archetype symbolizes the ability to rule over one's inner world with balance and wisdom. As we highlighted in our introductory video, the sovereign also has its own shadow polarities. The active shadow expression is the tyrant, the passive expression is the weakling. However, this video will focus on Jungian analyst Robert Moore's description of the sovereign as an inner authority resulting from the synthesis and integration of the magician, warrior, and lover archetypes. Moore illustrates this through the different roles played by the Egyptian pharaohs. Just as the pharaohs functioned in the role of high priest, the magician responsible for mediating between the gods and the people, today kings and queens, as figureheads of religions, remain symbols of our connection to the divine. Pharaohs were also military commanders, warriors leading armies to defend the kingdom from external threats, while also expanding its influence through conquest. And pharaohs embodying the lover were heads of their family and had to ensure that their issue would maintain their dynastic DNA. However, in modern constitutional monarchies such as the UK or Spain, kings and queens are so in name only. Stripped of their power, they do not represent integrated inner authority, and so are unable to inspire us, the people, to reach our full potential. They fulfill the role of magician, warrior, and lover, but at the most basic symbolic level. The life force behind the symbol has decayed. For example, the idea of giving royal assent to laws their governments pass is just a token stamp of approval. Indeed, they must make this empty gesture even when they don't personally agree with the law. As Robert Moore says, in the absence of the king or queen, the warrior becomes a mercenary, the magician becomes a sophist, able to argue any position and believing in none, and the lover becomes an addict. Benjamin Franklin explained the ethos of popular sovereignty when he said that the rulers are the servants and the people are their superiors and sovereigns. The idea of popular sovereignty inspired the American and French revolutions of 1776 and 1789 respectively, both which sought freedom from despotic monarchs, Britain's George III and France's Louis XIV. The American Declaration of Independence affirmed popular sovereignty through the inherent and inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, it was linked to the protection of freedom of speech, religion, and assembly, as well as against state oppression, albeit firmly in favour of men over women. Both revolutions asserted that the legitimacy of government ultimately rests on the consent and approval of the people. This is how modern democracies and constitutional monarchies are supposed to function. However, today, popular sovereignty may be as illusory as the divine rights of kings and queens. Indeed, in the documentary Can't Get You Out of My Head, filmmaker Adam Curtis suggests that over the last 70 years, governments have increasingly become beholden to the financial considerations of a wealthy elite at the expense of ordinary citizens who elected them. Put simply, the ideal of popular sovereignty has slowly eroded and been placed into the hands of so-called leaders of industry, politicians and celebrities who have been elevated to the position of demigods, sitting comfortably at the top of Plato's hierarchy. Democracy itself, you may argue, has become a modern, noble lie designed to keep people in their right place. While conspiracy theories try to explain how this came to be, and anarchists fantasize about destroying the system it maintains, and so-called good citizens just do as they're told, the noble lie would fail to have power over us if we were not so prone to project our inner authority onto others. You can take your pick of demigod, philosopher kings and queens, ever happy to offer their insight in return for our mindless consumption. Trump, Macron, Oprah, Gates, Musk, Taylor Swift, Blair, Bono, Klaus Schwab, the Kardashians, and others of a similar ilk shape our choices from the clothes we wear, food we eat, medicines we take, thoughts to think, and even the policies governments should pursue. While Plato's noble lie encourages us to believe we are less worthy, we naively project the gold of our true potential onto these demigods. And such is the duality: when they don't love us back, we project our shadow onto them and hate them, further feeding the illusion we are powerless, before they redeem themselves with acts of performative vulnerability, and we love them again, until we don't. The world's stage becomes a childish pantomime where empty gestures are backed by empty words. The elite are caricatures, and the world's complexity is reduced to a nursery rhyme. With all this madness, why do we continue to cede our power to others through this process of psychological projection? The difficult answer is because we don't want to do the inner work and embrace who we really are. The road less travelled is not an easy one to take, but take it we must. Reassessing popular sovereignty is a good place to begin, not just to better understand our rights and responsibilities, but to recognise our true potential. What is not well understood is that the sovereign archetype can also refer to the archetype of the self. Not the self as synonymous with the ego, or how I narrate the story of myself, but the self with a capital S, a higher self, which in the Hindu tradition is known as Atman. Specifically, Atman is the innermost self or soul, identical with the ultimate reality, including both the Divine Mother, representing the immanent and creative, and Brahman, the eternal, formless, and transcendent. Throughout the Hindu tradition, Atman is also associated with sovereignty in the sense that it is the supreme ruler within the individual being. In the Chandogya Upanishad, it says, "That indeed is Brahman, that self is this inner ruler, immortal, free from fear, the Brahman world, the one self, the firmament of consciousness." According to Robert Ascioli, a contemporary of Carl Jung and the founder of psychosynthesis, the work of realizing the self begins with understanding the true relationship between our ego or sense of I and the self. By tempering our base drives, we can begin to transcend the ego's limitations and instead respond to the evolutionary impulse to wholeness which lives within us all. Surrendering to this impulse is necessary to bring together diverse and sometimes conflicting elements within us into a harmonious and interdependent whole. A failure to establish a harmonious I-self axis in this way can lead to inner conflict and fragmentation. Indeed, when we acknowledge that inner work is something greater than getting a makeover for our personality, we can engage the work of integrating fragmented parts with patience and care. This begins, as Clarissa Pinkola Etz suggests, when we start to ask the right question. The properly shaped question always emanates from an essential curiosity about what stands behind. Questions are the keys that cause the secret doors of the psyche to swing open. So, what is it to truly rule over one's inner world with balance and wisdom? It is here that More's idea of the sovereign as the integration of the warrior, magician, and lover archetypes can be most useful. Piercingly, this synthesis is found in the symbolism of the coronation of a new British monarch. This begins with the recognition in which the monarch is officially recognized by the Archbishop as the rightful, divinely ordained ruler. In other words, that they were, literally, born to rule. For us, this is the same as recognizing that our bodies were created to be a vehicle for our soul, our inner knowing, discernment, deep feeling and passion for life. And, if we are ever in doubt, our beating heart is all the evidence we need to remember the divinity in our humanity. Next, the monarch takes a solemn oath in response to the recognition, to acknowledge their accountability to not just divine law, but also human laws. For us, the only solemn oath we need to take is to be accountable to the care and proper nourishment of our bodies as a vehicle for the divine. Then, the monarch is anointed with holy oil, the so-called chrism, by the Archbishop, on their hands representing the will, chest representing the heart, and head representing the mind, symbolizing the bestowal of divine grace upon the ruler's reign. For us, we don't need holy oil. It is enough to be anointed metaphorically with the wisdom which dissolves the scales of ignorance from our eyes. Seeing the nature of reality clearly, we can align thoughts, feelings, and actions in service of our own self-realization. Then, the monarch is invested with regalia rich in symbolism, aligning with the magician archetype's role to connect the unseen with the seen. The orb and scepter symbolizes the monarch's spiritual authority as protector of the faith within their realm. To misquote the Old and New Testaments, for us, it's enough to remember we are all priests and priestesses, endowed from birth with the right and means to communicate with the divine and share our experience with the world. Aligning with the warrior archetype's role to take decisive action to protect the well-being of the realm, the sword and golden spurs represents the monarch's role as defender of the realm. For us, we don't need a sword or spurs, simply the discernment of a sharp mind, able to identify the values we wish to truly live by, and a strong heart with which to honor them. Aligning with the passion of the lover archetype, which nourishes our compassion for the well-being of others, the gift of money in a velvet bag symbolizes the monarch's charitable duty. However, we don't need to rely on the kindness of the privileged. The ultimate gift of charity is to undertake the inner work required to nurture a worthy sense of purpose in the world. Finally, the crown, representing the monarch's legitimacy as God's appointed ruler, is placed on their head before they are seated on the throne, signifying their ascension to the highest position of authority within the realm. We don't need a physical crown. By meditating on the 1,000-petaled lotus at the crown of our head, our pineal gland, the brilliant point of light at the center of our skull, is opened to reveal our intimate connection to all life everywhere. Neither do we need a physical throne. The true seat of power lives within the heart, where we find the I Am, the image of the transpersonal self seated upon a beautiful lotus. In closing, homage is paid to the monarch by their subjects to affirm their allegiance, loyalty, and submission to them as God's representative on earth. For us, there is no need to show deference to any external symbol of God's power. The only homage we need to make is to the great majesty of the transpersonal self as Atman, which lies within. A great place to begin is seeing this majesty in the beauty of others, the earth and all her creatures. If you knew you were sovereign over your own mind and the thoughts you have, sovereign over your own body and the responsibility for how to care for it, sovereign over your own heart and the purpose it is called to serve, and sovereign over your own inner knowing and ability to speak with God, would you still need external images of power to project your inner authority onto? If you had faith that divine law serves you no less than kings and queens, would the noble lie be no more?